I actually stumbled into a Uyghur ethnic minority wedding ceremony.
Oh,
And
nice.
that was fun. I mean, as a photographer, that was God's sense, really. I mean,
Yeah,
so I just
yeah.
went in there and I was just shooting away, with my camera
Nice.
and partaking in the festivities. No doubt, give you a very complete picture of what China is all about. And that's the reason for my book. The whole idea is to keep heritage alive, and
Yes.
so that people will give a chance to know all these things about culture, history of the place, and then form a more informed view of what they have seen and what they have experienced, really.
All right, everybody, I'd like to welcome into the studio Alex Go. Alex has written 2 books here. The first is called My Heritage Journey. This is a beautiful book. It's quite thick, a lot of beautiful pictures in here, really documenting, your family's history in Malaysia, in Singapore, and in China. And then you kind of really dive a little bit deeper in this book, say 200 weekends in China, as you actually spent, obviously 200 weekends traveling back to China, visiting all of these UNESCO heritage sites and really tracing your family's history. So I think it's a really amazing story that you have. And that's why I wanted to invite you to Real Talk China, because I'd love to hear about it personally and then also just, help share that with everybody.
More than happy to, Cyrus.
All right, fantastic. So what got you interested in learning about your history? What made it such a big and important thing to you?
Well, I guess it all started way back during school days, really. I mean, I'm a member of the Scout movement, and I was a Scout for about 12 years in school. And in the Scout movement, you picked up various curiosities that was there. And I learned to be very curious about things, about life, humanities, and things like that. And the other part of it is also my interest in photography, adventures and photography, really. Okay. So it all started way back during high school, and a keen interest in history, and then because of my ethnic background, Chinese history in particular, really. Yeah. So that, I guess, over the years, that kind of like get built into my DNA. It flows in my blood until I got a chance when I was in my career with an oil and gas company. The break came in 1994 when I was offered an assignment in China itself. Okay. Back in those days, in 1994, back in those days, China had just kind of like, not too long in opening up after the, of course, the Cultural Revolutions and then and so forth. That's so, right. Early 1990s, late 80s, 90s, a lot of companies moved in, including my company, Mobil Oil. So they moved in, and then I guess they needed an executive to help build the organizations back in those early days, and I was given that chance. So, nice. Yeah, and I moved in, pick up my family together, and we moved into China, into Shanghai proper, really. Nice. And it was Shanghai. It was a very different Shanghai back then.
Yeah, I know. I've studied a little bit of Shanghai's history because that's the first city that I moved to in 2007. So I lived there from 2007 to 2013, and it's probably the city I know the best in China. But I remember in 1994, I think that's when the Jinmao Tower was built. I think that's probably one of the first, because obviously the Oriental Pearl TV Tower was the flagship structure that kind of was built in Pudong to really kind of open up, Shanghai, saying, look, we're going to establish this free trade port, really start doing some business. And I think the Jinmao Tower is pretty much right in around 1994. Is that right?
That's correct. That's correct. And it was the Jinmao Tower, and it was just not too long after the Oriental Pearl Tower, which is the TV stations across over at the Pudong area.
That's right.
Okay, if you had lived in China, in Shanghai, Cyrus, let me give you this little Back to the Future kind of a shot.
Okay.
You would have traveled on the elevated Yan'an Highway.
Correct. Many times.
Many times. I mean, as you get out from Pudong, Puxi to the Hongqiao Airport on the other end. when we were there was no Yan'an elevated highway.
Oh, wow. Okay.
There was no Yan'an elevated highway. It was one of those narrow roads. You just imagine the whole stretch of the Yan'an elevated highway. It's just those narrow roads that you walk along in Shanghai, I guess in the foreign territory or the foreign regions area.
The French concession area. Yeah, for those of you not familiar with Shanghai, basically the Yan'an elevated highway is the major highway that kind of just goes right through the center of Shanghai. It's really the one major road that is just so central to Shanghai. So obviously it's a big elevated highway, as the name suggests. So that's amazing. It'd be incredible before that was constructed to be in Shanghai. I could imagine the traffic jams were quite insane.
They got it up, and my first tour of duty in China was for a period of 3 years, 95 to 98.
Okay.
When we got there was no Yan'an elevated highway. Mm-hmm. By 1998, when we left, the Yan'an elevated highway was all up.
Yeah.
Think of the amazing engineering construction feat that has to go into that, and of course talking about the people living, the relocations and stuff like this. It's amazing speed, really.
So your first opportunity to live in China was in 1994. You're relocated with your family there. You spent 4 years living in Shanghai. And for everybody, you're also, you were in the oil and gas industry for, I believe, over 30 years. So you're an executive in that field. So after, so you had your taste of being obviously living, as an expat in China, and that must have been really great for you to start, exploring a bit of China during that time. Is this where you kind of got the travel bug to start visiting these sites in China?
Yeah, actually, it actually all started in Hong Kong, really, because before going into China, we had this 2 weeks orientation in Hong Kong.
Okay.
So in Hong Kong, I was presented a book that was commissioned by Mobil Oil of this Japanese photographer, Hiroji Kobuta.
Okay.
And to basically, he traveled around China, took excellent photos and put it into a very nice coffee table book.
Okay.
And in Hong Kong, before I went in, one of the things that was given to me was a copy of his book. So as I flipped through the book, I had mentioned earlier on that I've got this keen interest in adventures, dabbled in photography from the early part of my life. Mm-hmm. And looking through the book from a photographer's viewpoint, and I go, wow, these are amazing places. Can anyone ever go to all these places? It's a photographer's dream, really. It's a photographer's paradise. So that kind of, I would say, got me going. Took my travel back to want to know more, want to go and see more of these places. And of course, I'm a keen follower of National Geographic's program, and I got personalities like Michael Yamashita. He did few features for National Geographic's like Marco Polo, stories of Marco Polo, the Grand Canal, and stuff like this. So all this come put together, and I just fashioned myself that, look, this is something that I would love to dabble in. So the first tour of a duty to China, 1995 to 98, I started getting into wanting to see more of China.
Okay, that makes sense.
But I had my family in tow, so I had to balance between kind of like work life and family life, and with the family you can't really take them off too far. So it's kind of around the region, Suzhou, Zhejiang, Hangzhou, and area. It's only when I got to my second tour of duty, many years later, I got a second shot at China with my second tour of duty. Okay. With a company which is essentially working with Caterpillar machines. Okay. So, and I relocated to China on a single status, meaning family has all grown up and they have their own lives and things like that. So I went into China on the second tour of duty on my own. Okay. And with that, I had a lot of time and more opportunities to really, really discover the old country.
Right. Oh, and that's really where I think, is so beauty about China is when you start getting out, and this is probably the same for every country in the world. When you start getting out of the major cities, you go to the rural areas and really start, seeing some of these sites that, not many people are going to see. Obviously, many tourists that come to China, obviously Beijing, the Forbidden City, the Great Wall of China, maybe going down to Shanghai, seeing that city, going to Hong Kong. We kind of go on this very regimented tour, seeing the highlights. And of course, all of these things are great. But once you start going to the countryside, and I've been very fortunate, I've probably been to about 50 different cities in China, as I've traveled around the country and seen, but my favorite memories, always come from, the interior and really getting off the beaten path and seeing some of these great cultural sites. And there's the beauty of China is just truly incredible. So, this was your second tour of duty. And, let's jump into the conversation. I want to learn more about this because, Alex, is that true that you, I think it's unconfirmed, but I believe that you're potentially the only person that has visited every UNESCO heritage site inside the country of China?
Yeah, I mean, I belong to a little so-called focus interest group. We call ourselves the World Heritage. It's a World Heritage group, really.
Okay.
And each time one of us travel to a World Heritage site, we will update our travel in that group. And so
Nice.
we have kind of like a little ranking.
Okay.
There are about 1,200 World Heritage sites in the world.
Okay.
And the top guy, I think he must have visited close to about 100 or 1,100 of them.
Wow.
He just make a living out. I mean, I would say make a living, but his life is just all around, travel around the world to all the heritage sites.
Amazing.
So anyway, I did the same. I mean, I joined the group. I update. We update as we travel. It becomes like a little hobby. It's a small sense of competition, really. So
yeah, absolutely.
To date, I have about 200 to my name, which puts me somewhere in the 170 or 160 mark.
Okay.
But the interesting part is that at one point, I was the only person. I mean, because it works very well because it lists down all the places that you have visited in details. Really, I mean, and it's an amazing site. So nice. I could tell at one point who else have visited all the places in China. And
Correct.
At one point, I held that title.
Okay, nice.
So
I'm sure there's been some other people, and there might be a lot of there might be some I think really some patriotic Chinese nationals, inside of China that have probably visited every site as well. So I mean, you're certainly one of the few foreigners that I think have accomplished the feat. And so nonetheless, I mean, it's quite an accomplishment. In total, I believe, is it 52 World Heritage sites inside of China?
I think it's now about 55. The latest being back in 2019 when the sites, the two new locations were added. The wetlands of the Yellow River region, which is somewhere near Yancheng, which is just north of Shanghai, and also the architectural site of Liangzhu in just outskirts of Hangzhou. That was the two latest addition to the list back in 2019. And then
now, have you had a chance to visit those two sites?
Oh, as and when they put it up to the list, I make sure I was there. I mean, in fact, I was there before they make the announcement official because normally they normally announce it in July. So I had gotten words that China, these two from China is going to make the list. So I did a trip to China in June in 2019. That was my last trip to China.
Well, good timing because obviously the whole world changed in early 2020, and that was actually my last trip to China was in September 2019. So I was very grateful to be able to go back at that time. And I haven't been able to get back since, but I'm looking forward to that day as well. So let's talk a little bit about, some of these visit sites. I mean, out of all of the 55 sites that you visited in China, what would you say, what was the most difficult one for you to get to?
The difficult one would be those sites out at the Kekesili, which is the vast region west of Shanghai.
Okay.
West of Shanghai. I mean, it's really really remote regions. I didn't get really into the remote part of this this Kirkasili area, but we went out as far as Gomot and along the outskirts to be able to get a peek into what it's like. There are a couple of interesting ones as well, which is really off the beaten track.
Yeah.
Couple of them up in the northeast. I'm talking about Xanadu. You know the song sung by Olivia Newton-John, Xanadu. So Xanadu is really the old capital of Kublai Khan, really.
Kublai Khan, the Mongolian leader.
The Mongolian leader, that's right. And it's right up at near the Inner Mongolia border region.
Okay.
It has a very so-called not a reputation of being the most unpopular or least visited UNESCO heritage sites in China. Very low visitation rate because it's so far out. But and then you go out there and there's really nothing. You just see grassland and a few, I guess, some stones piled up. But that's really standing there. You can imagine yourself. Look, this was actually at one time the imperial palace of Kublai Khan. Wow. And where Marco Polo spent many years of his life, at the state of at the court of Kublai Khan. So there you go. One of those.
That's amazing. Well, I think it's quite amazing. When even though there might not be a grand structure there, or it is very not visited very often. Like you said, when you're standing there, and you're standing, where history was made, hundreds and hundreds of years ago, there's a certain power there, isn't there? And it's quite an amazing feeling, and you can start to use your imagination. Like you said, imagine, Kublai Khan and his entire, palace, and everybody was right there, and it is a really, really, really neat experience for you. I mean, and that's amazing because there's so many parts of China that I have yet to discover that I look forward to going back at some point in my life. Hopefully I get a chance to bring my children there so they can explore their Chinese heritage and, explore some of these great regions. So that's kind of one, my wife and I, at some point, as our kids get a little bit older, we would like to take summers and go back to China and start exploring as well.
You do that. I mean, that's the way. I mean, and the joy to see them learn, really, going back to the roots, really.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, out of all the places that you've been, what is the most memorable, for you? What is a personal favorite, if you will, or one of the most memorable sites, or any unique stories that you want to share in relation to one of the sites?
I would say the memorable ones are, there's one up in we'll stay in the East region, and on the East, the old capital of Koryo 1. I mean, we're talking about, you're standing at the side, and then you just try to you put yourself in a position of how history was many, many years ago. So standing at this place at the border of northern China and Korea, North Korea.
That's right.
It's a place, Xi'an, in the Liaoning province. Okay. What is popular? What is amazing there is a cluster of royal tombs out there, and it was the first location of the Korean Empire, or the early Korean Koryo 1 Empire, and the first capital of Korea was actually right at that spot.
Oh, interesting.
In the northern part of China, before it got moved to Pyongyang.
Correct.
And this is what get me excited, really, because that each time I share a post, and I mean, the smug in me says, "I bet you didn't know that, right?"
yeah, of course. I didn't know that. Yeah.
I become the boring old uncle that goes and have all these facts, but it's true, really. I mean, it's standing there, and as you look out, it says on the other part it's North Korea, and then over this part is China, really, and then you've got all these clusters of royal tomb that straddles both northern and southern China. So that's an interesting place. I mean, again, one of those underrated, not too popular sites that you don't get too many tourists. In fact, when I was there on that day, I was the only one. I was the only one there.
Interesting.
So in the days without selfie sticks, you'd be hard pressed to get a selfie, a personal photo. Nobody is there to do it for you.
No. That's amazing. Yeah, good call.
Yeah, I guess the memorable ones would be those on the western side of China. Starting from Sichuan, Shanghai, Xinjiang, and Tibet. Those will be, as you get out to the west, you really, really see a different part of China. a really scenic, spectacular part of China with heavy in culture and
Absolutely.
history.
And that's one of the things that I always like talking about China is the fact of the ethnic diversity within the country. There's over 300 different dialects that are spoken inside of China.
Yep.
We know there's over 55 different ethnic minorities, also inside of China. Let's talk a little bit about those two regions you just mentioned, Xinjiang and Tibet. Obviously, both of these, names have been, in the media a lot. And,
Yeah.
I want to talk just about, what your experiences were in these regions, because I know there is a very large local presence there. Obviously, for example, in Xinjiang, you have the Uyghur ethnicity. People are speaking the Uyghur language there. Tell us a little bit about, what kind of cultural sites are in Xinjiang and your experiences specifically there.
Oh, sure. I mean, and I can give you a very, very down to earth, personal, so-called feedback on that, because I normally travel on my own. I mean, I arrange my own travel. You don't go with a group, so
right.
I have the freedom of moving around. I'll just go to one place and then hook up a transportation over there, and then I'll just move around. So. I've been to Xinjiang about 3 times, and Tibet about 3 times during the course of my 2 tours of China, and it's just an amazing region of China, really. You mentioned the diversity of the culture. You see the development that has gone on in those region. I mean, my last trip to Xinjiang. We move up all the way to Kashgar, which is the westernmost point of China. Okay, and this is a region whereby it borders Turkmenistan, Afghanistan, and Pakistan. These are the region, and you see a completely different fabric in terms of the social dynamics, really. You go out there, people go about their way. I mean, I was fortunate because as I was walking around, I actually stumbled into a Uyghur ethnic minority wedding ceremony. And
nice.
that was fun. I mean, as a photographer, that was God's sense, really. I mean, so I just went in there and I was just shooting away, with my camera and partaking in the festivities.
Nice.
So
that's awesome.
Beautiful region, really. It's a beautiful region. So when, of course, as you mentioned, I mean, recently Xinjiang and to some extent Tibet, it gets into the news. I mean, it's kind of hurts. It's kind of sad, to see that a lot of this brought out to the fore, and you know very well that not a lot of so-called research has gone, or not a lot of, I guess, people who have not really have been to the place to really get a feel of what is the situation on the ground. So I mean, I've been there, and it's a different story. It's a really different region. You go out to the different sites, and apart from the sites, you make sure that you go out to see the everyday activities of the people out there. You go out to the bazaars, you walk around the neighborhood, and that's more that you can get from a trip out to places like this. Right.
Yeah, thank you for sharing. And how about Tibet? Tell us a little bit more about your adventures in Tibet. I one of the palace there is I think one of the most stunning structures in all of China, and I believe that's on the back of the 50 renminbi note. Is the beautiful palace, the Potala Palace in beautiful in Tibet. Tell us more about that, about your experience there.
I did 3 trips to Tibet. The first was in 1998. Way back in those were really the early days of traveling tourism in China.
Yeah,
absolutely. 98 was just Lhasa, so we went around. A very slow moving, down to earth Lhasa. The second trip was we venture out a little bit more to the Shigazi area, a few more other places in Tibet, where you find some very spectacular sceneries, really. Okay, the last trip was just before we came back. I packed up and decided to demobbed from China, and we decided that I have to make it a point to go all the way to the foot of Mount Everest, and that's what I did. So
yeah, the base
the
camp.
culture,
right?
the culture. I mean, you're going out to Tibet. It's just an amazing feeling, really, because the whole place is full of mystique. It's a place of a lot of religious and spectacular sceneries, and then you see and watching basically the culture of the people out there, unspoiled culture. I would say, yeah.
Oh, fantastic. Fantastic. Alex, I've got a question for you.
Sure.
I really, first of all, I really appreciate you sharing all these memories, because I think for most of us around the world and anybody listening to this episode, we've all been under lockdowns because of COVID-19. We haven't been traveling as much as we want. So this is kind of a fun episode because we can relive some of these experiences that we've had, and, look through some of your photos that you have. And, you've really, done a great job as a photographer, sharing and chronicling these journeys. I've enjoyed them so much, and so happy to share some of those photos, in the episode here today as well. How about some tips for a first-time visitor to China? For example, if, people that are listening to this, and let's imagine that they're on their bucket list is to go to China one day and to travel, into China. What is one place that most likely is not on their radar? Maybe most likely they've never heard of it, but what is one place that you think a first-time visitor should travel? That, it's kind of off the beaten path, or would be a good place for them?
Be adventurous. What should they have? Have a sense of adventure. Go out there and try to experience something which is outside of the big city environment. And with that, I would say, go out to the regions in the West.
Okay.
Go out to the Yunnan, the Xinjiang, the Tibet. It's not out of bounds. I mean, unlike what people would think. Oh, with all this recent rhetoric, it's the place that you can go. I said no. I mean, I beg to differ. Go out there, and see for yourself, really, especially Tibet. I mean, live Tibet to the last. It's like the grand finale, really.
Nice.
But you do the ethnic region. I mean, of course, if you ever been to China, Shanghai, Beijing, Xi'an, these are the must-dos. But beyond these places, go out to the West.
Nice.
Sichuan is one of my personal favorite, really, because Sichuan is packed with history.
Yeah, Sichuan's a beautiful place. That is very good. And also, anybody that obviously likes the spicy food, Sichuan, of course, known for the really spicy.
You're talking.
The very spicy hot pot there in Sichuan, which is so world famous and awesome. Alex, let's end today's video with a question that I ask most everybody that comes on as a guest here on Real Talk China. What is one thing that you would like the world to know about China?
I would implore, really, is to get to know more about China. You need to visit China. You need to be there. You need to move around. You need to talk to the people on the ground. You need to go around and feel for yourself. Okay, and that will no doubt give you a very complete picture of what China is all about. And that's the reason for my book, because I pack together my book with one central theme, which is 饮水思源. The whole idea is to keep heritage alive, and so that people will give a chance to know all these things about culture, history of the place, and then form a more informed view of what they have seen and what they have experienced, really. So one of my favorite Chinese phrase, which I carry with me and I keep sharing and keep telling the folks, is that I say, look, this one, 前事不忘，后事之师, which means you don't forget the past. At least we forget. In short, it's least we forget. Don't forget the future and the past, so that we can learn for the future. Yeah. So what I did with all my books is basically to try and collect all these stories, these sites, this history, and this culture, just so that folks can have a convenient platform to know China a little bit more.
Fantastic.
It's a fantastic place. It's a place of mysteries and wonders and a lot of cultural richness. And you just got to go out there and experience it.
Yeah, that's great advice. And I think that is so true. I mean, if anybody, if you haven't had a chance to go to China and you really do have an interest in China, and I think it's interesting because after living in China for 10 years, I probably had, 24 friends come out to visit me over that 10 years. And every one of them that came left with a very different set of expectations. They came with a set of expectations. They left with a different perception of the country of China. And I think that's some really solid advice, right? You need to be on the ground. You need to experience it firsthand. You need to have some interaction with the locals, to really get a better appreciation,
Absolutely.
of this great country. Alex, what about these books? I think some people would be interested to grab a copy of these. Where could somebody do that?
Yeah, I'm in the process of actually listing it on Amazon. It should be up by month end.
Okay.
It should be available. It should be available on Amazon by month end.
Okay.
I mean, I'm working with my publisher to get it done. I'm chasing him a little bit on that.
Fantastic. Wonderful. Alex, I want to thank you so much for coming here on Real Talk China. And I hope one day we can maybe do some exploring together in China. That'd be a lot of fun.
Yeah, and my pleasure, really, Cyrus. And thanks for having me on the channel.